Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know, I'm your humble host, the Yahweh of Revolution, Epstein Bombshell. How could they have had his death notice the day before his death? Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Where the manure is hitting the fan, if you know what I mean. Let's get right into the content. Salute.
We have a bombshell revelation from the Epstein files. You guys know we have been following this very closely, and every day it seems like there's something else that is announced or released. And this one is probably the most damning expose of all, if I had to pick one.
Salute.
We had a lot of questions surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein, and this drafted statement from the U.S. Attorney's Office really does confirm what many of you have believed for a long time. This one is the one that is really making people go, holy crap. This is why they didn't want these files released. Obviously, of course, to protect powerful people, but not just that, also to protect what actually happened to Jeffrey Epstein that night in that cell. It is this release here, and it was Clint Russell from Liberty Lock Pod who shared it. He was the first one that I saw that shared this, and I double-checked the files as well, and I can assure you it is there. Couldn't believe this was real, so I double-checked the DOJ site. It's real. U.S. Attorney Berman announced Epstein's death with letterhead dated the day before he was found dead.
That's impossible. How can he have a letterhead dating Jeffrey Epstein's death before the death even took place? Were they plotting the death? Were they putting together a cover-up about the death? Well, this don't mean he was dead. This do mean they was finna run the he's dead play or execute him. That's what this means.
Gets weirder. Bill Barr announced Berman's resignation less than a year later. Berman denied he was resigning and was then removed by Barr on June 20th of 2020. Trump denied any involvement, but it was confirmed by later reporting that, in fact, it was Trump who wanted Berman removed. The rabbit hole is endless. So let's get to the document in question, shall we? Here's a screenshot of it here. This is a draft from the United States Attorney's Office, the Southern District of New York, U.S. Attorney General. You see it says here, Jeffrey Berman, for immediate release. Check the date. Friday, August 9th, 2019. It even has the contact information here. So what does this statement say? Statement of Manhattan U.S. Attorney on the death of defendant Jeffrey Epstein. Manhattan U.S. Attorney General Jeffrey Berman said earlier this morning, the Manhattan Correctional Center confirmed that Jeffrey Epstein, who faced charges brought by this office of engaging in sex trafficking of minors, has been found unresponsive in his cell and pronounced dead shortly thereafter. Today's events are disturbing, and we are deeply aware of their potential to present yet another hurdle to giving Epstein's many victims their day in court. To those brave young women who have already come forward, and to the many others who have yet to do so, let me reiterate that we remain committed to standing for you and our investigation of the conduct charge in the indictment, which included a conspiracy count, remains ongoing. Now, this is 2019, and they told you that this remained ongoing. As we know, that was not the case. Okay. But the important part about this draft right here, and I'm going to show you the final one, is the date. Friday, August 9th, 2019. this was the first draft that Jeffrey Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell. But there's just one problem. Jeffrey Epstein didn't allegedly die on August 9th. He was pronounced dead on August 10th. That was a Saturday. This is the most recent bombshell from the Epstein files that has many people in shock.
Yeah.
Now, many of us have said for the longest time that
because it's two things. It's one or the other. Either they was planning to assassinate him, or they was finna run the Jeffrey Epstein died play, and he was finna be extracted by the CIA and Mossad, and he not dead. It could only be two things. That's a fact.
we believe that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered, that he did not unalive himself. And I stood by that for the longest time. And I think many of you did as well. But now you have another piece of evidence that shows you that the U.S. Attorney Office had already drafted correspondence on August the 9th. He was found dead, allegedly, August the 10th. So even if this is the first draft, the date should be the 10th. Now, I know many people may see this and they may say, well, maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe they just happened to get the date wrong. Sometimes people confuse dates. Okay. But the day is also there. The day says Friday. August 10th was Saturday. Let's get to the final draft. Let's show you here. Shout out to Aaron Parnas for sharing this. The final press release sent out on August 10th added the words apparent, we're going to say unaliving because it's YouTube, apparent unaliving in the first sentence. Those words did not appear in the press release dated August 9th. So let's look at the final press release. United States Attorney Office, Southern District of New York. Okay, have it here. The date's right here, Saturday, August 10th. The Manhattan U.S. Attorney General, Jeffrey Berman, said earlier this morning the Manhattan Correctional Center confirmed that Jeffrey Epstein, who faced charges brought by this office of engaging in sex trafficking of minors, had been found unresponsive in his cell and was pronounced dead shortly thereafter, an apparent unaliving.
Nathan Watkins wants to spend taxpayer dollars on liberal lobbyists pushing a liberal agenda. And Watkins testified to the legislature against capping your property taxes. But Watkins didn't even pay his own. Nathan Watkins, wrong for Texas.
At 4 p.m. Eastern, the market follows a daily rhythm. Positions settle, big money rebalances in the.
So this is the final draft. Again, all this is in the Epstein files. So now all of a sudden it goes from found unresponsive to unaliving. And the dates are different. So they said he died on August 10th. The first draft said August 9th. The first draft did not say that he unalived himself. It just said he was found unresponsive. Let's continue on here. Today's events are disturbing, and we are deeply aware of their potential to present yet another hurdle to give Epstein victims their day in court, to this brave young women, yada, yada. So that's the same verbiage there. And again, that is dated August 10th. So we got a problem, ladies and gentlemen, because you see, now you're starting to see other reasons why they didn't want you to see these files. Like, obviously, of course, the most obvious reason is that they're trying to protect powerful people. But then there's little things like this, right? Which basically shows you one or two things happen. Let's say you still don't think that there was any foul play here. Okay. Then that means that the U.S. Attorney's Office is completely clumsy and reckless, right? Because I could even understand maybe you made a mistake with the date, the 9th, the 10th. Maybe you just got the date wrong. But the day, like you said, Friday, August 9th. Now, all of a sudden, it does not make any sense to me. In the first draft, you said that he was found unresponsive. They didn't say that he unalived himself. And in the final statement, all of a sudden, the day is the 10th, and it says he unalived himself. And then they will point to people and get mad at people for asking questions when it's quite obvious what is happening here. Just more evidence, in my opinion, that shows that he was killed. And if he wasn't killed, he was taken away. Let's not forget what another person said. Let's go ahead and go to this part here, ladies and gentlemen. We have to remind you of this. There was an individual who anonymously posted on 4chan this morning of Epstein's death, August 10th, 2019, has been identified in the Epstein files as Roberto Grijalva. He was an officer at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York. He claimed that Epstein left his cell Friday evening, shackled in a medical wheelchair, while at the same time, an unauthorized trip van arrived at the prison, which he believes took Epstein away the night before the news broke of his death. Now, Roberto.
All right, you got to stop buying generic Viagra if y'all over 40. You can get 9 pills of 100 milligram generic Viagra for just $7.
Had said that he saw Epstein leave. He was taken away from his cell on August 9th. The first draft of that letter from the U.S. Attorney Office is dated August 9th. Let's go on here. I just want to show you. We have the images here. Roberto Grijalva up here is highlighted, signatory details. So you can see, yes, this person was real. Yes, they did exist. Okay, let's go here. This is the post. It was posted anonymously at that point in time. And it's dated August 10th. Not saying anything after this. Please do not try to dox me. But last night, after 4:15 count, they took him medical in a wheelchair, front cuffed, but not one triage nurse says they spoke to him. So first of all, they took him. We have to ask the question, who is they? Next thing we know, a trip van shows up. Trip van just shows up magically. We do not do releases on the weekend unless a judge orders it. Next thing we know, he's put in a single man cell and is supposedly unalive. Here's the thing. The trip van did not sign in, and we did not record the plate number. And a guy in a green dress military outfit was in the back of the van, according to the tower guy who let him through the gate. You guys, I'm shaking right now, but I think they switched him out. Give me a second. This guy said this August 10th, 2019. So something else that's very damning here. Notice that he said they don't do transfers on the weekend. All of a sudden, a van shows up to do a transfer, according to him, allegedly. He believed that he was switched out. At this point in time, especially you guys know how 4chan is. So at this point in time, this is just seen as some anonymous, crazy person. But now we have that statement from the U.S. Attorney Office, which can kind of point to this and show maybe Roberto wasn't crazy. Maybe he was telling the truth. And this is why I push back on this whole conspiracy thing, because conspiracy doesn't necessarily mean something is false. It also doesn't mean it's bad. Conspiracy, in my opinion, from what I've seen over the years, means that it's something that goes against the status quo. the approved narrative, oftentimes from the State Department, etc. But no one wanted to hear this at that point in time. And now you have that letter. And again, he said that he was shaking. United States government memorandum, Metropolitan Correctional Center, New York, August 12th. Warden in DIA. On February 9th, 2019, approximately 1:50, Gradrova passed on to oncoming staff member Officer Davis and present shift staff SOS Shakir and Officer Joyner. That inmate, Reyes, was going WAB and possibly may not return. Also, that inmate Epstein will be needing a cellmate upon arrival from his attorney visit. Again, look at the date, August 9th. Memorandum went out on the 12th. It says on August 9th.
Okay, I'll check it out, family. So good.
And see, this is why I'm saying, like, now you look at things a little bit differently. And I want to go back to that video footage that we saw before. Do you guys remember when the DOJ, Cash and Pam Bondi and all of them, they said, we've got the video footage outside of his cell to show you that obviously there was no foul play there? Remember what people noticed from that video footage? Here's a reminder, just in case you forgot. Yesterday, the DOJ released 10 hours of Epstein cell footage and got caught cutting out a full 60 seconds. The feed jumps clean from 11:59 to midnight. No explanation, just gone. That's probably the exact moment he was calmly walked out of his cell. Now, let me show you this here.
For small business owners, taxes was more questions than answers. Now tax.
The time is right here in the bottom left-hand corner, so you can see 11:58:57. So pay attention to that. Whoop, there's the jump. There it is. There it is. See how quickly? Boo! Right there. Just skips. Oh, dear God. What happened to that whole minute? Now, when this was called out, Pam Bondi said, oh, well, the cameras just automatically shut down for like 1 minute at a certain amount of time. That's normal procedure. Da 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 da. The point is, there is a lot that can happen in 1 minute. A lot that can happen. You ever try timing yourself for 1 minute? I don't know, like maybe like when you're at the gym and you're taking like a rest from a set and you're like, let me set 1 minute. I do a little bit longer or whatever. You ever try to like actually time 1 minute, wait 1 minute and see it feels like it takes so much longer because you're waiting for that time to go by? A lot can happen in 1 minute, especially if they took him out the other way. Doesn't have to come out this way. What if he came out back that way? Right? And then there's something else, because you see, we're not fools. This came from the Daily Mail. You know, you got to take them with a grain of salt sometimes, but considering everything else that's being revealed, I think we need to take a look at this. They wanted both Epstein and me dead. Jeffrey Epstein's cellmate levels extraordinary claim that the government deliberately left Epstein unprotected in the jail cell. This was reported February 6th. Let's go down here. Right about here. Targeloni, that's his cellmate, asserted a terrifying conspiracy. See again how they keep using this word conspiracy? That's to discredit. That Epstein was deliberately exposed to violence as part of a calculated effort to ensure he would not survive long enough to stand trial. I was clearly not protected on purpose, nor was Epstein. I truly believe that the government wanted both Epstein and me dead. Fast forward to up here, it says the former cop further alleges that shortly after he was transferred to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn after Epstein's death, he was assaulted by other inmates with a lead pipe, along with other violent interactions with other inmates where he was nearly beaten to death. Let's go on a little bit more here.
But he a hitman.
It's just showing evidence that he was imprisoned there. The murder cop who Epstein had already accused of an attempted killing just 3 weeks before his final breath now insists that his proximity to the financier was a calculated hit. It is no coincidence that prior to the trial, I was transferred to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan and deliberately placed in the same cell as Jeffrey Epstein. In the petition, he also claims he was accused and wrongfully convicted, saying that he was the target of the lead prosecutor, former United States Attorney Maureen Comey, daughter of the former FBI Director James Comey. Interesting how that works out. Goes on to say here, for a prisoner looking to submit a pardon petition, the journey begins with the warden because he is still serving time. Targilone's request is technically a petition for commutation of sentence, a formal plea for the president to cut his time short. So he says that he was wrongfully accused, but he was, I guess, placed in the same cell with Epstein. But what I found interesting about this is that he said that he believed that this was on purpose, that they deliberately did this, that Epstein was deliberately exposed to violence to make sure that he would not survive. So we go again back to there's no, in my opinion, I don't believe the latter, by the way. For those wondering, I don't believe the latter, that they just made a mistake and got the date wrong. I don't believe the latter. I believe this was calculated. I believe he was killed, and many of you do too. And now you have this statement from the United States Attorney's Office that just makes things a little bit even more suspicious. Everything that you have been told about Epstein from corporate media, because they're not even going as far, from corporate media and from the State Department, and especially even Benjamin Netanyahu's getting into all this, from Israel as well, you need to have reasonable doubt. Because the reality is, if Epstein would have survived and would have stood trial, he was probably going to talk. And they didn't want that to happen. I got to tell you guys, I think a lot of times people look at people who are called conspiracy theorists or whatever, and they're like, these people are crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. But I got to tell you this, when it comes to this Epstein situation, I think people are owed an apology. I really do. There are many of us that have been covering this for quite some time. I've been talking about Epstein, I think, for years, not as much as I have been the past week, because there's so much to go through with these files. But the reality is that the US government, they wanted you, actually the US government, the FBI, the intel agencies, they really wanted people to just look the other way on this one. They did not expect for people to press them for these files like Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie, and Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the reality is, without them doing that, we don't have these files. And we still don't have all of the files. But they didn't expect this to happen. They figured, well, everybody knows this guy was a creep. It'll just go by the wayside. But that didn't happen. And Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino, even though he quit, all of them are complicit. They lied to your face and told you there was nothing to see here. They saw the same files that you and I saw. And actually, they even saw more because we still don't have all the files. These people are liars and they need to be held accountable. All of these people, there need to be demands right now
Salute.
that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel resign immediately. And those demands need to come from us, the people, but also Congress needs to make that demand. These people need to resign. So I have more information that's going to be coming forward about other things that just came out about these Epstein files that I have to do these in separate videos just because it's so much information. But when we get to all of it, whew, it just gets crazier and crazier. Hey guys, this was a savvy clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Crystal?
Indeed, we do. So apparently the government drafted an announcement of Epstein's death dated the day before he died.
Right.
I am not kidding. Like, this is the down the rabbit hole through the looking glass moment if we weren't already there. So we'll break that down for you as well as some other revelations. Powerful people that were involved. There's some important reporting that's going on here. Bibi Netanyahu coming back to Washington yet again, and once again to beg for war with Iran. So we will take a look at that. Even Republicans have been uncomfortable with the stunningly racist video that President Trump posted. Initially, the White House walked it back. He doubled down. What does it say about him, about our politics, etc.? We're going to take a look at the Super Bowl through the lens of sports betting. Just how much was wagered? Was there insider trading? You will never guess what the answer to that one is. Olympians are speaking out and getting backlash from the right, and we're going to be joined in studio by Dan Osborne. He is an independent candidate for Senate in Nebraska. We're going to be doing the AMA today. So if you want to be part of those live AMAs, make sure you sign up at breakingpoints.com, Sagar.
That's right. Thank you to everybody who has been supporting the show. We are starting off with Epstein with some very, very wild stuff. Almost certain that eventually we'll get hit with a demonetization. That's why we rely on our premium subscribers. All of this Epstein coverage. We understand, it makes advertisers and all those other people uncomfortable. Luckily, we don't rely on that. We rely on all of you. So support us if you are able to. breakingpoints.com. If you're just watching this on YouTube, no worries. Please just hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're listening to this on a podcast, please share an episode with a friend and rate us 5 stars. Really helps other people find the show. All right, let's go ahead and start here with Epstein. There was an ad actually released by many of the Epstein survivors. We're going to go ahead and put it up here on the screen just so you can see some of this in the background, many of them appearing on camera. They're saying on November 19th, 2025, the Epstein Files Act was signed. They cross out the line transparency. They say 3 million files have still not yet been released. They have black marks over their mouths. They're talking there about one of the largest sex trafficking conspiracies, which has now been unveiled for everybody, and calling for more of the release of the files, holding up pictures of themselves.
This was not just about no sex trafficking. This was about everything, discussion you could imagine under the sun, anything these devilish satanic ball worshippers was into. Sex trafficking. That's the small potatoes or what they was doing.
It highlights, of course, some of the central, most important people in all of this story. But most importantly, I think for all of our purposes, and they're asking there, stand with us. It's time for Attorney General.
What about is the Jewish supremacy. Jeffrey Epstein was a Jewish supremacist, looked down on anybody that wasn't a Jew. He said they was going. That's why they can do whatever they wanted to whoever they wanted. And if you look at the Talmud, it talk about that. They can human sacrifice. They can eat people. They can do whatever they want because you're nothing to them. And that's what these people running really scared from. What Jeffrey Epstein was saying. He is a Jewish supremacist, and he looked down on anybody that wasn't one of them.
General Pam Bondi to tell the truth. Let's do, though, continue now down the rabbit hole. As Crystal said, genuinely unbelievable stuff. Let's go ahead and put this up here on the screen. One of the most stunning documents yet that was uncovered. Great find for whoever was able to see this, because I would not have been able to. They say, couldn't believe this was real. So I double checked the DOJ website. The U.S. Attorney Berman announced Epstein's death with letterhead dated the day before that he was found dead. Bill Barr announced Berman's resignation. Then less than a year later, Berman denied he was resigning and was then removed by Barr on June 20th, 2020. Trump denied any involvement, but it was confirmed later in the reporting that in fact, Trump, who had Berman removed. The rabbit hole is endless. This is from Clint Russell, one of the people who flagged this. And I do think it is genuinely unbelievable. For immediate release Friday, August 9th, 2019. Now, you could potentially ask for innocent explanations, but the Department of Justice has not released anything as of yet. This information has been public now for 48 hours or so, and you do have to just be like, okay, look, I feel like I try to keep all my words very carefully. I always say Epstein died. I don't say he was killed. I don't say he committed suicide. It's just one of those open questions. We don't really know what the answer is. We have the video, which was released, of showing another person going towards the sun. You have, the guards were asleep. The cameras weren't working. There's actually a routine way where the camera resets every single night for some reason, according to the Attorney General. You've got the cellmate, questions. You've got the former guy who was in the MCC who's been on our show and is like, sorry, there's no way any of that happened. And so, you would actually be, in my opinion, the most responsible to be like, yeah, he probably was killed. I still don't say it because I don't know it definitively to be true. Then you see something like this, you're like, all right, what else do you say?
If it was the only thing, and you didn't go through even the whole list because we'd be here all day.
Right, yeah,
There's the fact that, we never found the noose that was used. What do you mean? He was in a tiny jail cell. What do you mean we never found the noose that he was allegedly hung himself with? Oh, there happens to have been this orange blurry figure that we all pretended, that the Attorney General and Inspector General, that they all pretended didn't exist when they did their report on this. Oh, that's interesting. What's going on with that? And then you have this. If it was the only thing.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
If it was the only thing, you could go, maybe they just got the date wrong. Maybe they just were being a little bit sloppy and they got the date wrong. But when you look at this and you look at everything else, and then, lo and behold, this guy, the U.S. Attorney Berman, was fired under very strange and contentious circumstances less than a year later. You just got to look at this and go, it becomes very, very, very hard to believe the official narrative. And of course, a million people had plenty of motive to take this guy out. The other thing that we learned, that we talked about before, is that his team was they were looking at, hey, maybe we can cooperate. Maybe we can name some names. Maybe we can do a deal here. So quite to the contrary of Epstein feeling like, I have no way out and this is it for me. I'm going to spend the rest of my life, which I'm very used to these coddled circumstances. I'm going to spend the rest of my life behind bars. He was still exploring avenues and trying to work it and see what kind of a deal he could make. So I don't know, guys. This is just absolutely wild. The one thing, so this is identical to the official announcement that did ultimately go out from the government, with two exceptions. Number one, the date got updated to the day that he died. Number two, which at this point, I'm like, maybe the conspiracies about him still being alive, maybe that's a possibility. It's so wild that I literally cannot rule anything out at this point. So the date gets updated. And then the other thing that was added is that he was dead by apparent suicide. Those words got added in. Otherwise, it's identical to what ultimately went out.
Right. So, okay. And remember this, it's very possible. There's some potential about planning, but the thing is that you look at some of the timing for all of this. The last guard check was on 10:50 p.m. on that Friday night. There was no check until 6 a.m. This is according to the official narrative. So official narrative should be that nobody knew he was dead until some 6 a.m. So it's not even some time zone thing that you could argue. Like if you go back and you check the timeline, again, according to the official timeline, nobody was supposed to know until about 6. Right. So if that's the case, then there's no way that you could have drafted it and like you said, also they added the term of parent suicide. We didn't even mention Michael Baden and the autopsy. That's actually that was one of the first things that convinced me, where I was like, oh man, I mean, this is Michael Baden, right? He came out, yes, I know he's hired by the family, but look, he released his own findings talking about the hyoid bone and the way that it would look if it was a strangulation versus a hanging. Also, we can't put these photos up there because it's too graphic, but you can actually see the photos of the care that was for him after he had been found dead. And you can see the mark on his neck. And, you know, one of the speculations was it a sheet? I'm telling you, I saw the mark. It's not a sheet. Like, there's no way that would have left a mark like that. And that's just, you know, maybe I'm wrong. You could send me different ones, you know, if you find something else, but it's just one of those where I think it is just absolutely.
You know the type. Runs up the bill and slips out before it's paid. Like Nathan Watkins. Watkins wants to spend.
Absolutely crazy. Let's go to the next one.
Insane.
We're going to continue in things are getting more unhinged as we go. The government put boxes covered in a sheet inside of a vehicle to trick the media, pretending that it was Epstein's body. It says, due to the large news media presence outside the MCC, a male OCME official called and said he would be arriving at the loading dock with a black vehicle in order to thwart the media and use boxes and sheets to create what appeared to be a human body, which was then put into the white vehicle, which the press followed, allowing the black vehicle to depart unnoticed with Epstein's body. So yeah, that's where
why all the cloak and dagger?
Right. Yeah.
Why? Why is it such a problem for the media to follow the body? Why is that such an issue? Is this typical procedure?
Exactly.
In high profile cases that you have.
If he's dead, why do you care about traffic? I mean, I know this sounds insane, but it's true. Like, this actually is true. You can go and check the file names for yourself if you want to. And, you know, we double checked on some of this. All right. So this is another totally crazy one. Let's put it up here. So as they flag, on the same day that they opened a child sex trafficking case against Epstein in 2018, he ordered half a dozen 55-gallon containers full of sulfuric acid to his private island. So what's up with that? And look, again, I'm reading the wire transfer form for to St. Thomas, LSJE, LLC, purpose and description, ×6, 55 drums, sulfuric acid with fuel and insurance charge for transport, materials for conductivity probes, replacement pH and cable -RO plant. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's an explanation. You have private jets all around. I don't know a whole lot about acid and all this other stuff. I have read a decent number of the plans around the island. I know they waste water. You know, again, I'm not an expert. I'm just saying, like, that's one of those where you put it together and you're like, yeah, it's pretty creepy. It's pretty weird, especially when you have massage rooms with masks, you know, all over the island. You have trap doors, as one does. So this is apparently a photo that surfaced where it was some trap door that was there on which apparently opens directly into the ocean. So again, I mean, what are the innocent explanation here? This is where they're dumping waste. This is where they're dumping something, you know, I don't know.
Some sort of maintenance.
Yeah, maintenance, right. Maintenance. If you also own a private island, please email me and tell me about what it's. I'm not familiar about what it is. Tell
us about your sulfuric acid and ocean trapdoor needs on your private island, because we're very curious.
Who among us doesn't have ocean trapdoors in our house? I've stayed at some hotels on the beach, not that great, but they don't usually have trapdoor. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe every 5-star resort in the nation on a beach has trapdoors into the sea. Maybe it's certainly possible. Maybe it's a scuba diving thing. Maybe it's a way to access your septic tank, although I guess that wouldn't even make a lot of sense. I'm purely I'm just telling you that these are the facts, and this is what apparently shows up there. So, you know, this is presented without comment because I don't have a comment. I don't know why else. I don't know why you would need one.
I mean, you said in our pitch that advertisers get uncomfortable with this. Look, in fairness to them, I get uncomfortable with this too, because it's like, what am I supposed to make of this?
Yeah.
What is a sane and rational, non-hysterical person supposed to make of this? It becomes increasingly difficult to not look at all these emails, the way they talk to each other, all of these weird things surrounding his death, the, you know, emails where they're saying, oh, did you torture? I love the torture videos, etc. All the code words, and not think that the even that it is even darker and even more elaborate, and that he was even more powerful than I ever could have imagined. And to your point about, putting all the different things together that you're like, well, that's weird. Well, that's weird. Well, that's weird. Well, you're going to put it all together. It's really freaking weird. Another piece of that is the way that the government has behaved. Recall, okay, so now supposedly we've gotten all the Epstein files we're going to get. Right. According to the government, now, Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, and others are continuing to push. Massie's being very aggressive. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But just remember what Kash Patel told you. He told you that he looked at the files and he is convinced without a shadow of a doubt that Epstein killed himself, and that this was proven definitively by the files that Kash Patel looked at. Have we seen those files? What was it that you were looking at that was so persuasive to you that you went out in public and said, nothing to see here, we're moving on? Let's go ahead and remind ourselves exactly what he said. This is A6. Let's play that.
You told me when we last talked, this is 8 months ago when we did an interview at the FBI in Quantico, that you were convinced that Epstein killed himself in jail. Today, 8 months after that, are you still convinced?
Yes.
100%.
Yes, sir. There's no credible information. None. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And the information we have, again, is limited.
So the answer is no one?
For the information that we have.
In the files?
In the case file.
Skyrocketing property taxes, rising costs. When we needed Terry Leo Wilson, she voted no.
So he absolutely killed himself, Sagar, and he didn't traffic anyone, any girl to anyone. That he's convinced.
There is nothing that has been released where you can definitively say he killed himself, which is what Kash Patel said. Kash Patel said he definitively, if anything, like we said, we got the video, we got this thing, we had all of the preponderance of evidence prior, you had all of the holes in the investigation, you had the DOJ, even the DOJ initial report around the sleeping guards and all this. None of that shit made any sense, period. But don't listen to me, listen to Kash in 2020. He's the one who said all of this. And he had his hands on all of this information. And this is all eventually that came up with. On the second part about involving others, there's nothing that has been a definitive smoking gun, and we should all be honest about that. There are some look, what are the threads that we would all tug on? Oh, I don't know, all these wire transfers to Russia. I don't know, all of these photos of creepy old dudes with their collars open, smoking cigarettes on the couch with a bunch of women, chasing girls around the kitchen. Let's continue. Prince Andrew. Can you even say hovering, like trapping this girl underneath him? Were they really there under their own volition? Maybe, but I was talking to Scott Horton about this, and I was like, look, I know libertarians think that it's not a crime, and apparently the current justification is well, they wanted to be there and they were getting paid. I'm like, it is actually a crime though to send a wire transfer to a foreign country and fly women in for the express purpose of having sex. That's actually literally sex trafficking, not joking.
Of their
and especially
age,
regardless of their age. Yeah. And in Russia, as you may all learn, or Ukraine, it's not like all these girls are willing in the sense that they want, that liberal sex worker types always try to pretend. Sometimes they get kidnapped, sometimes their family or whatever is threatened. It's not a willing enterprise. So just putting that out there.
Or they're told they're going to be models.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
And they get to come to the US on this special visa, and they're going to be in high fashion. Right. And then next thing you know, this is known, this is reported out, the way that modeling agencies were used as pipelines for trafficking girls. And, and these guys were Epstein and Trump, by the way, deeply enmeshed in these modeling agencies and clearly using that as a path to gain access to girls and women.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Wow. This just broke from the UK press. New story on Prince Andrew. The former prince known as Andrew. Now police are assessing if Andrew Mountbatten Windsor shared confidential reports from his role as the UK's trade envoy with Jeffrey Epstein. U.S. Department of Justice appears to show Andrew sharing reports in 2020 with Epstein of his official visits to Hong Kong, Vietnam, and Singapore. Wow.
And this comes on the heels of Lord Mandelson and it being revealed, and he's under investigation now for providing inside information from inside the UK government directly to Epstein, tradable information that he was providing directly to Epstein in the midst of the 2008 financial crisis.
Right.
And plotting with him and, to try to see what, how they could loop Jamie Dimon in to put pressure on the government to make sure this like banker bonus limit thing didn't go through. So, that would be, it shows you too, like all the questions about how he made his money. Clearly, insider trading was some significant component of that. And then you can see with the Bill Gates, email he sent to himself, the way that he would get something over, like not over on someone, but he would gather some sort of compromising information on them. And then if they tried to back away from the financial relationship, it was like, oh, no. Let me just, subtly and not so subtly remind you of the various things I know about you and the way that I can destroy your life, your brand, your marriage, your family, whatever.
Let's continue, shall we? By the way, again, to Cash's whole point about how nobody else was found to be implicated, let's put A8, please, up there on the screen. You can see inside of this document, this was a great flag by this journalist. They say, buried in the footnote of the Ghislaine Maxwell's court filing, she makes the bombshell claim that there were 25 accomplices of Jeffrey Epstein entered into secret settlements and that there are 4 unnamed employee co-conspirators. That's almost certainly his secretaries. The fact is, Maxwell is no longer content with conditions of her confinement. She has tasted this glimpse of freedom and appears determined to push for more. After losing her appeal in the Supreme Court, she has filed habeas corpus. This is the legal equivalent of a last resort. It asks the court to overturn the conviction on the grounds that it's so fundamentally unfair or unconstitutional it can't stand. So just to show that she has a lot of other stuff that she can point to. And in that petition, that 25 accomplices, she also asserts that the 4 Epstein employees were co-conspirators and never charged, like herself. If you will all remember, this is tracing back to the non-prosecution agreement, but if you combine this with some of the other reporting, let's put A7 up there on the screen, just to give you an example. The FBI at one point had actually posted a 21-page presentation of all the evidence they've gathered in the case, including a summary of allegations against 11 men. The list was then taken down after this was flagged by Julie K. Brown over at the Miami Herald. So just to show you again, like, the idea that the FBI didn't have information, maybe they didn't have prosecutable information. I'm just telling you, though, that at this moment, the idea that they did not have information or potential leads and all of that on various it's just completely not true.
Yeah.
Completely not true.
You won't be surprised at a number of the names in here. And one of the names identified by the FBI as a prominent man for whom significant allegations had been leveled against was President Trump. So look, to your point, does any of this is this meet the evidentiary standard that would have to hold up in court? No, it doesn't appear based on what we have publicly. Were these things investigated? What happened with all these tips? Were they investigated? Where's that information? Were you able to dispel all of, these allegations against all of these various powerful men? And then I think the Ghislaine Maxwell thing is worth dwelling on because, again, where does she sit right now? She sits in a club-fed minimum security prison that's supposed to be for white collar criminals. She is not supposed to be there at all as a sex offender, number one. Number two, even within that, she's getting all kinds of special cushy treatment with her puppy and her access to, electronic communications and her private ability to wander the grounds by herself and get visitors and the warden saying that he's sick of being her bitch. Okay. So she is playing some sort of a game here. And now this, to me, reads like a shot across the bow, right? Who are these 25 men that apparently struck deals, according to her in this legal filing, that apparently struck deals with our government to be able to, make this whole thing go away? Who are they? And why did our government have an interest in striking those deals with those individuals? If what she is alleging here is true, that would be a significant thing to know. Thomas Massie, I believe today, says that he is going to be reviewing a number of the unredacted files. He's supposed to have access to the entire cache of unredacted files. And he was asking people, okay, what should I look for in this, limited time that I have to go in? So he's continuing to push forward. And, let's go ahead and take a listen to the aggressive posture he is taking. He's saying he will use the nuclear option if the DOJ refuses to unredact the names of, the powerful men that are associated with this. Because remember, in this release, according to the law that Massie and Khanna pushed through and were able to get passed and signed into law by President Trump, there are very limited reasons that you are allowed, legally permitted to redact, okay? They have clearly gone far beyond that while screwing up and leaving unredacted a number of the victims' names and likenesses. So let's go ahead and take a listen to Thomas Massey and the way he's continuing to try to fight here.
I'm ready to do that if the victims want me to. They believe that the best way to get justice is to force the DOJ to release these names. I've already read one name in a committee with the FBI director there. That's Jess Staley. And again, he may or may not be guilty, but he's been accused by these victims, the lawyer tells me. And there are other names. I don't have them in my possession, but if the victims want to give them to me, I've expressed that I'm willing to do that. But again, the best way is to force the DOJ to release those names on those 302 forms.
And I just can't give enough credit to both Ro Khanna, but Thomas Massey. I mean, he is taking so much incoming from president, from AIPAC over his unwillingness to sign on to these like Zionist speech codes. He was, I don't know if you saw this video floating around. He was back in Kentucky at an Oldham County, which is like a suburb of Louisville, Republican Party event. And he was speaking and he was saying, you know, some just very basic things about how he doesn't serve, you know, any one party. He serves the people of the country, and they pulled his mic from him. So, you know, clearly he has really touched a nerve. And the fact that he's a Republican and he has a large following too, and like a lot of, you know, credibility. And I think people like myself who don't agree with him on any number of issues, like we're night and day when it comes to economics, for example, you have to respect this man and his integrity because he is truly risking it all here to push for the truth and to push for more transparency.
It's a very rare breed, rare breed in Washington. And I'm
Blessings, Queen. Salute.
As well as a body language expert, and today we're going to be analyzing whether or not Jeffrey Epstein could still be alive. Before we get started with this, a couple of quick things. One, I wanted to make sure you know this is not a psychological evaluation of any kind. These are just my opinions. In addition to that, I do want to remind you to like and subscribe if you want to see more content just like this. All right, let's go. What we're going to be analyzing today are documents from the Epstein files that raise the question whether or not Jeffrey Epstein could still be alive. Yes, I am as shocked as you are that I am analyzing this and that this is the subject of this video, but I'm going to give you some very compelling reasons why I felt this was necessary. Ever since I started analyzing the Epstein files, I've had people commenting that he in fact is not dead, that he didn't die on August 10th. It's not something that I ever took very seriously until I started looking at some notes that were found in his prison cell. The picture you're looking at right now is actually part of a detailed escape plan. I'm going to walk you through step by step what all of this means. I've gone through and translated all of this, and by the time we're done, you'll understand why I find this so compelling. All right, let's just jump right in. For the sake of context, we're going to look at a few pictures before we actually get to the escape plans, but I think this will help you understand why they're so compelling and where they were found. Now, if you look at this right here, this is L tier. He was housed in what's called the SHU, the Special Housing Unit. L tier was the unit where he was housed. He was on the right side of this unit. He was the first door on the right. Now, as we open that door, as we go in, you can see it's disgusting, just covered in blankets, covered in sheets. And as we go down, there's part of, this was not the noose that was actually found on him. So we still don't know where that is, actually. But although that's part of it, this is part of what was found where he was the next morning. Now, the most interesting part of this cell, at least for what we're talking about today, are some notes that were found. Here's one note. Here's the second note, and that's the one I showed you at the beginning. And here is a third note. And this, I think, is actually the other half of the piece of paper up here. Now, these pictures had actually been released before. I knew that there was a note, but I was never able to read it because this was the angle. This was the shot that we had. And there was no amount of zooming in that could make you see more than a couple of letters here and there. It was impossible to translate, impossible to make sense of, but I was always curious what it said. So what kind of notes was Jeffrey Epstein writing in his cell? I really wanted to know. Well, fortunately, now we have the answer. Now, when you first look at this, it just looks like a mess. It's probably very, very difficult for you to read, so I've gone through and translated it. We're going to look at that in a second, but I wanted you to get a chance to see this. One of the things that's important in terms from a handwriting perspective is that I think that Jeffrey Epstein is a very impulsive person. He has really scribbly, bad handwriting, but most of it can be translated. I was able to read most of it. And once we really see all of this in context, you're going to understand why I'm calling it an escape plan. So the way that I've done this is I've gone through and typed out the words on top of this so you can see what I think it all says. And then I moved the words so it was next to them so you can see the word right next to what I think each one means so that you can decide for yourself if you agree with my assessment or if you think it actually means something else. So first, let's go through. I'm going to explain what all of this means. The translation I have here, I am very confident in. If there's anything that I'm less confident in, I will tell you. I will point out things that if I'm not sure what it says or if I'm not certain that's what it says. But if I typed it out here, I'm overwhelmingly sure that this is correct. Now, I'm going to explain what everything means. And once I'm done with that, then we're going to go through and I'll let you make your own determinations if you think that I got it right. So I'm going to start with what was most obvious to me, the thing that drew my eye first, where it says red notice, and I put equals EXT. Now, if you don't know what a red notice is, that's an alert that Interpol puts out if there is a fugitive on the loose. If there's someone that is internationally wanted, a red notice notifies agencies that if this person is found, then you extradite them back to the country where they are being looked for. So that's why it says red notice equals EXT. So if there's a red notice out for him, then he will be set up for extradition. That was my first clue that if we're looking at all of this in context, that he was planning on getting out of the country. That was his goal by writing all of this down. Now, from the red notice, there is an arrow pointing back up to this main circle right here. So that means that if he's MIA in the US, in other words, if he's missing, so this would be shorthand basically saying he's missing. For anybody that's watching this that isn't from the US, I'm going to try my best to explain various acronyms the way that we would do them here. So MIA would be a way to say that he's missing. So if he's MIA in the US, then a red notice would occur. Then a red notice would be set out by Interpol. That's what that arrow means. But if we're to look at this circle, right, MIA US, let's look at some of the various branches of this. So visas would suggest that he's going to be planning on going out of the country. He would need to fake his name. It would have to be fake visas, but he would need visas. Something I guess he was considering is that he wrote no rights. So it could be depending on the country he goes to, his rights might be different. Interestingly, he wrote tourism here. Now, if he was planning on leaving the country, whether or not he would be posing as a tourist or whether or not he would be going to places that have tourism, there's some consideration about tourism because I'm pretty certain that's what that says. It either says tourism or tourist. His handwriting is so bad. You'll see in a second where the confusion is there. Now, up here, it says EXT tax. It could be EST tax, but I think that what this is estate tax. So in other words, if he is to die, how much money goes to estate tax, or that he's considering the estate tax right here. Another branch has banks, so obviously something that he's going to have to consider if he's going to have access to money. Now, here's one that I am somewhat less confident in, is that there's a name written here with dollar signs next to it. I put a question mark because I don't know what letter that is, but it does look like BLCH, like NIL or something like that. But this is very clearly a name and clearly associated with money. And below that, you can see it says guards. It says guards clear as day. That is 100% what this says. So whether or not that means that he needs guards, whether or not that has to do with prison guards, that's unclear, but that is very clearly stating guards right underneath this name and the dollar signs. So if we're to look at the top portion of this, if he is MIA, if he is missing, a red notice will occur. He needs to keep all of these other things in mind. These are all things that he is thinking about. Now, if you look in the top left here, you see a number of letters, M and then R with a line to T with a line to M. And then above that, it looks like either a C or an L and then a dot and then a T. I didn't label those, but I think that that's what that says. So the question is, are these different tiers within the prison where he is? Because he's in L tier, M tier is below him. Are these people's names that he's connecting from one to the other? We don't have enough information for that to be clear, but I just want to point this out. So if later on, when we get more information, if somehow that makes more sense, we're going to circle back and we'll address that. Now, underneath red notice, he wrote K equals exclamation point, exclamation point. My interpretation of that is he considering whether or not if he's dead, will there not be a red notice? Or if he gets away with him being dead, is there no red notice then? Because there are 3 exclamation points. I typed that out exactly as it's written. To the right of that are the initials LSR. And I say initials because I assume that's what those are. I couldn't find anybody in the Epstein files with those initials, or at least typing them out by those initials. I'm not sure who he might know that has those initials. When I show it to you in a minute, maybe you interpret the letters differently because his handwriting is so bad. But I feel with a high degree of confidence that says LSR And I don't know what that means, but it's very clear. Now, interestingly, underneath guards over here on the right, he wrote government, and I believe this says clear. So government clear. That's my best read on the second word. 100% certain it says government. I'd say 70% certain that it says clear. My interpretation, he's looking for a government where he would be clear to go. Now, interestingly, if we go back to the left, underneath LSR, it says Muslim. Now, obviously, he's Jewish. So the question would be, why is he writing Muslim? I interpret that as where he might be ending, where he's thinking about going, where he might end up. Right below it, it says AS. You could consider that Arabic states potentially, or Arab states, because if we go a little bit lower, and I know this is confusing, this is hard to follow, there's so much, but I'm trying to get the flow of how he thinks about this, because down below it we see Q-SA. Now there's a lot of different ways you could interpret that. Q could be a question. I think of this, if it's below Muslim and AS, it could be Qatar, Saudi Arabia, or Qatar to Saudi Arabia. That's the way I interpret those letters, because he is a very well-traveled person. He knows people pretty much everywhere. So these are not out of the question as far as what these potential initials could mean. Now, to the right of that, he wrote Nigeria with an exclamation point and underlined that. So now that is a country that does extradite to the U.S. So if we're to assume that Qatar and Saudi Arabia are identified, obviously there's Nigeria. These all seem like possibilities, places that he could consider going. So to summarize what we've got so far, we've got a long way to go. At this point, he's been thinking about if he's missing in the U.S. and it's found out that he's missing, then a red notice would be applied. He would need to have all of these other things in place. If we're to go back to the left a little bit where it says red notice, if you look below that, it says the name Mara, question mark. Now, unfortunately, I, for the life of me, cannot figure out what it says below that. It says enlist, maybe. It's so unclear. That looks like an E, an N. It's impossible to read that next letter. It looks like an S and a T. So my best guess would be that it says enlist, but that's with a very low degree of certainty. No, I assume Mara is a name and not code for something else like Mar-a-Lago. I'm sure some people are going to go there, but that would be strange because there's two R's, and that's not really how Mar-a-Lago is spelled. But he is writing in code to some extent. So keep in mind, Mara may not be as literal as it seems. Maybe it isn't literally somebody's name. Maybe it literally is. But that's one of those things we're going to earmark. And as I continue to analyze other files in later videos, maybe we'll circle back to that. And this, I can't read any of it. It looks like it says LSR again, but it's such a low degree of certainty I didn't type it on there. It's completely illegible. So I have to mark this off as something where I can't truly translate any of that. Now, below that, it clearly says gangsters. And below that, it clearly says extort and kidnap. So we're going from red notice, and below that it says Mara, something illegible, gangsters, then extort, kidnap. Now, what this line of thought is, I don't know if he's concerned that could happen if he ends up in the wrong country, but there's clearly some train of thought here, starting with Mara and ending with extort, kidnap. Now, if we're to go all the way to the left, to me, this looks like the name Nicole. Now, that, once again, that's not with a high degree of certainty, but I can't think of anything else that would fit there. Who Nicole is anybody's guess. There are probably people named Nicole in his orbit. There are probably multiple people named Nicole in his orbit, so I'm not going to guess it as a specific person, or I'm not going to guess who it is. Sure, it's a specific person to him, but I'm not going to speculate as to which Nicole this might be. Above that, my interpretation of this picture right here is that I believe this is a little map of the United States. That's what it looks like, just a weird little sketch of the United States and a squiggly thing coming out of it. So to me, that looks like a map. And the lines may just be the bars of being in the prison cell. So there's not as much meaning in that part. Now, below that, it says island and people. Now, he's lived on an island. Whether or not he wants to end up on an island, this is somewhat less clear, but those are very clearly the words that are written. So I'm not going to try to interpret too much about what that means, because it's its own separate idea. But now I want you to focus on the right side again. Now, on the right here, we see it says jet-US prop. Now, what that means is that he's thinking about whether or not the jet that he would be traveling in is U.S. property. Epstein and his associates were obsessed with aircraft registration, jurisdiction, things like that, and that's what jet U.S. prop would be. He's thinking about whether or not the jet he's traveling in is in fact U.S. property, because that does change some things jurisdictionally, as well as whether or not there's seizure and all of these other potential issues that could come up. So the fact that he's thinking about that is important. What else is important is that jet U.S. prop was written in a different color. Most of these were written in blue ink. Jet US prop was written in black ink. Now, the reason that matters is that means that this was enough of a plan that where he wrote it out and he came back to it. It wasn't just sketched out and thrown away. He came back with additional thoughts later on. Now, below that, you can see this little scribbled box with the word Brad on top. I'm going to scroll up so you can see it without my comments on it. So you see it's a little square with a little building next to it. And on the left, I interpret this as an airplane. At least I believe that's what it is, or it could be additional buildings. But it very, very clearly has the word Brad written on top. And then below it and to the right of it, you see what I interpret as supposed to be where cars and planes are parked. I think this right here is a little airplane. So when I saw this, I immediately thought it looked like a private airport because this shape and design of the building is unusual. Airports are low and they're large. It's a very distinct look. So I was curious what the closest private airport is. The closest private airport to where he was is Teterboro. It also is one of the busiest. I was curious if he'd ever actually been there. So I typed it in the Epstein files, and it showed that it's been mentioned about 7,000 times. So this is definitely one he's familiar with. It does seem to resemble at least this style of airport. I'm not insisting it is this one, but it certainly looks quite a lot like it. So if nothing else, this lends credence to the idea that this building he's drawing is a private airport. He is thinking about getting to a private airport based on everything else he's saying and getting out of there. And the name Brad is associated with that. Who that is that a pilot? Is that somebody who would help him get there? That's unclear, but the name Brad is very, very clearly written on top of that airport. And you may be thinking, well, he's just fantasizing about escaping, and that may be part of it. I think the unusual aspect of that is that he would put a specific name with it. He would write a name on top of the airport. Now, as far as I know, Brad does not stand for anything. It's not an acronym for anything. I take that in a very literal sense as a name. Now, as you can see right here, a portion is redacted. All we can see is that something was underlined. I would absolutely love to know what this said, because something here is very important because it's underlined many times. But if we're to look to the right of that, it said medical/PT. Now, the way I interpret that, PT typically is shorthand for patient. It very clearly says medical. So the question would be, is that how he's thinking about being transported as a medical patient? Possibly. So if we're to scroll down a little further, we see G/computer PB, some question marks, then VI. Now, immediately when I saw this, I knew what this was referring to. PB is Palm Beach, VI is Virgin Islands. So if we're wondering what has something that he is worried about on it or something he's thinking about, it's the computer in Palm Beach. That's the one with the question marks. And just to be clear, so you know that that's actually how he would refer to his computer, I took a snippet from an email from Ghislaine Maxwell. Why do I have no sound on this computer? And it has PB in parentheses next to it because that's referring to the Palm Beach computer. So this is literally how they refer to these computers. Now, as far as the G/ goes, I interpret that, and this is my best guess. I'm trying to tell you what I think is a guess versus what seems more clear. I'm guessing that somehow is in reference to Ghislaine Maxwell. So as far as where this PB computer is, I would assume that she is in fact the one who has it. So if we start looking at this in total, it becomes very clear that there is a very detailed plan of escaping, and he is actively trying to figure out where he would want to go, how he would get there, and what he would do. Just so you can see for yourself what some of these various words say. I'm going to show you some of the more questionable ones. You can see if you have a different translation. But as we look at this, I put all of the words next to, above, or below my translation so you can see for yourself, see whether or not you think that's actually what it says, or if you have a different interpretation that somehow makes more sense. But I've read a lot of his handwriting. I do feel confident in anything that I actively translated that that's in fact what it says. Now, there is one part that I feel unclear on, and I didn't reference, which is this part right here. It looks like it says Healthline or Heathrow or something that starts with Heath. But it's so hard to read, I don't want to present a potential interpretation because all four of these are right next to each other, and I think they would all be based on getting these right. And this is the one part that feels very uncertain to me. So if you have any thoughts about what this says, the one below it looks like it says press or press T. And then after that, it looks almost like it says 3 hits or shorts or shots. This is just too unclear. So I would love to be able to have a full interpretation of this, but this makes it impossible. But as you look with words like gangsters, it seems very clear that's what it says next to it. Extort, kidnap, it seems very clear that that's what those words are. Having completely abysmal handwriting myself does help me, I think, understand this a bit more. And as you can see, the name with the $sign, BLECH, could be an L, I suppose, but I would think BLECHNIL or something along that line, or that last L could actually be an S. When we look at all of this together, it seems pretty clear that his goal was to get out of there, and he was thinking about all of the different logistics of doing that. Now we're going to briefly look at two more documents. These will be quick, but they do give a little bit more color to what we just looked at. Now, this next document right here, I'm not going to bother reading through all this. I don't think it's of consequence, but this is basically him complaining about being in prison. But then when we flip it upside down, which is down here, it comes out with something else. This does seem a bit more relevant. So at the top, it says something about data. That's unclear, but we do have the years 2002 to 2005. We have two initials below that, which I would assume are names, but maybe they stand for something else. But once again, they are coded. He does not want this to be obvious what he's talking about. But the more significant part is directly below that. Jail out equals 10. Now that seems pretty clear. He's talking about getting out of jail. Now, what does the 10 stand for? Is he paying somebody $10 million? Is it 10 o'clock? What is 10? All we know is that he is saying jail out equals 10. And I think that's extremely consequential, particularly given the context of the other page we looked at. Now below it, some of this is written very clearly, but it's unclear what he's referring to. So he says nothing at all. And then the last word, straw, show. I just can't read those middle letters enough to make that make sense. And then below that, no, it looks like it says no sign me, but it definitely says no something me. So this obviously pairs together with the jail out equals 10, but he just writes so strangely, it's impossible to give you full context. And I don't want to make any major assumptions about what this is saying. So now this is the last page, blankets, AVR, and Medi. And then it says watch, exclamation point. Now this is very interesting because he had an excessive amount of blankets in his prison cell. We know that. That's very well documented. That was acknowledged in the OIG report, actually. So the fact that he had excessive blankets is a fact. AVR, the cameras were not working. So we know for a fact the cameras did not work at that time. And the last one is Medi, which is how people that think he escaped would have done it, would have been through medical. And he says, watch, exclamation point. So what is it that he's watching for? Something to do with the blankets, the AVR, or the Medi. But those are three of the big things that had to be taken care of if he was actually going to pull off something like this. So I think this page, despite the fact it's just a couple of words, could potentially be very consequential. All right, let's go ahead and wrap things up here. Hopefully this is helping you better understand some of what we saw today. I know it's hard to read. I know it's confusing, but there does seem to be some logic to it. There does seem to be some real thought put behind it. And it does seem to be that he was trying to work through the logistics of how to escape. Now, whether or not you think that he escaped or was murdered, he certainly seems to be planning for the future. He was someone that was actively thinking ahead. He seemed to have hope that there was a way out of this situation. So I think the official report on how he died continues to remain the least likely. If you have any thoughts about this, or if you have a different interpretation of any of this information, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'm very curious if anybody else has figured out any other pieces to this puzzle. I am continuing to work on other videos about the Epstein files, so if there's anything else you want me to
A rundown of some of the mess that is coming out of the Epstein files. We have updates from DOJ, several other things in the file, some of it disturbing, some of it weird. And this is one of the things that is disturbing and weird. Now, I just want to tell you, some people were irritated because this guy didn't have his shirt on, but it is what it is. He's giving good information. But yeah, I agree. Put your shirt on, especially when we're talking about these depraved things. But take a listen as to what was found in the files. I think it's going to shock you.
We are not mad enough about this. 2 days ago, I posted a video showcasing emails from the Epstein files indicating a clear, undeniable plan to manipulate the hormones of the American public to feminize men. I don't think people realize how scary that is. Your hormones are who you are as a person. Whether you're funny, confident, passionate, whatever, all of it is from your hormones. And what bothers me the most is how well they're succeeding. The average 20-year-old male today is biologically closer to a woman from the 1970s than they are a man. In the 70s, the average guy in their 20s had a testosterone level of 750 nanograms per deciliter. Today, that number is 350 for guys in their 20s. Average woman's testosterone was 50. We're literally closer to chicks of that time than we are the men of that time. This attack on our hormones is led by two major factors in our everyday life. First is in our farming. All of our fruits and vegetables are sprayed with a chemical called atrazine, the chemical famously known for its ability to turn male frogs gay. It does the same thing in humans. It's proven to be pumping us full of xenoestrogens and blocking our testosterone. The EPA denies these claims and keeps it completely legal, and it's sprayed on almost all of the produce that we eat in the United States. The main financer of these projects being none other than Bill Gates, the man publicly trying to reduce the population as well as frequent Epstein Island enjoyers. Second leader in the attack is Forever Chemicals, specifically found in plastic packaging. They're called PFAS, and they're in almost all of the plastic packaging for all of our food. These chemicals are manufactured by a company called DuPont. Coincidentally, all of the JP Morgan Chase bankers that finance this company are also all well documented in the Epstein files. They appear frequently. Starting to make sense why doctors aren't taught hormones in medical school, and if you ever try to ask about them, you're going to get looked at like a crazy person. If I was going to attack the American public using hormones, I'd also make it pretty difficult to learn anything about them.
Yes. And let me pop this up because someone, I don't know if you know this, if you want to look through the Epstein files yourself, it's very clunky and weird to do it on the Department of Justice website, but someone created kind of like a Gmail where it populated all of the files and emails into a Gmail system. And take a look when you just start to search different terms and different things, you can see everything that actually is pulled into everything that could be found in the files. And sorry guys, my throat started hurting this morning, so I'm a little bit off, but so this is jmail.world. Now, it would not work on Chrome for me. I had to put it into Safari. But as you can see, it's all the different emails. And I'll show you on the side. I don't know if it lets me show you this, but it's showing a lot of the contacts that are in here, okay, that are on the side. I don't believe it's all of them. But if you wanted to take a look at this for yourself, then you can. Like, for example, he just was talking about testosterone. So we'll go in here. So look at this. So it is in here. Now, one thing I like about the DOJ website, it tells you how many times is in here. I mean, it's 37. That's how many emails, but I just want to make sure it's the files as well. But if we even look up, let's do DNA. So we have 503 times that DNA is in here. Let's cross-reference that with the Department of Justice website. All right, as you can see on the DOJ's website, it has 2,027 results for DNA. So while you can use that other system, you're going to get more from here. Now, also, I've seen where they've included things twice, redacted some names sometimes, and then they didn't redact names other times. It's a very weird thing to go through. Well, one of the things that's really been people have been talking about, and I saw this originally, I just didn't get a chance to get to it, is how many times they talk about jerky, guys. And we are not talking about real beef jerky. And I'm going to go back to the emails just to show you some of the things that are actually found in there.
Flesh eating people.
Okay, so this gets really, really weird. I believe jerky is a acronym. It's a code word for human flesh, maybe child flesh, or just human flesh, baby flesh. I know it's really, really gross. It is what it is. But it says, there's one. Look at this. Actually, let's go back and see how many references there are. It's 96 right here, right? Did I look it up? But see, it's 380 in the regular files. But either way, look at this. Okay, so this is from Francis Derby, right? I don't know who it's to. It's redacted, but it says, just wanted to touch base about jerky. J.E. Epstein said he was going to start eating regular food again, so he might be eating less jerky. What does that mean? He's going to start eating regular food. That means whatever he's eating, jerky is like a regular food. It just doesn't make sense. And why is this important enough to email about? He's going to start eating regular food and not just jerky. That said, He has 6 bags of it in the downstairs freezer for his next trip. Who keeps jerky in a freezer? It's dried out. You don't keep it in a wet environment. You don't freeze it. So what are they actually freezing and calling jerky? I believe it should be enough to get him through. Any other questions? Let me know. Thank you, Francis Derby. Here, let's look at, I'm just going to click. Hi, Jeffrey asked that you make some beef jerky for him, please. Please confirm. I mean, it's just all over. Francis has time to come tomorrow. This is to Jeffrey to show me how to make it. Jerky class, anyone? It's like pizza. How many of these people like eat pizza, have pizza parties as adults? And everybody's just eating jerky, going to jerky class. Jerky's in the freezer. We need to coordinate Epstein eating his jerky because he may go back to regular food. He will also bring you a taste of his new jerky recipe from the restaurant and sends a warm hello. He is working at a restaurant called Cannibal and cooks, wait for it, beef jerky and steak. He has time at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Is that okay with you? Now, what I did was, because I tried to get some receipts on this. Let me pull this up. I looked up a restaurant, any restaurant called Cannibal. Okay. Let me switch this around for you so you can see it. So I looked up this restaurant called Cannibal that was mentioned. It is now closed. But this is the restaurant. Let me make this a little tighter so we can see it better. So it's in New York, which is fitting for him, but this location has closed. And there's a couple of reviews on here. It says incredible staff. We ordered, everything was delicious, blah, 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 blah. Take reservations. The Cannibal Beer and Butcher is your local butcher's restaurant named as an ode to the greatest cyclist of all time, Eddie Merckx. Our menu is rooted in sustainable meat and seasonal vegetables. Name Cannibal? I don't get this. The Cannibal is a carnivore's. Let's make it bigger now because I can't see it myself. I have the website as well. Oh, we didn't got on this rabbit trail, so I'm going to do another video of all the other stuff I found. It says the Cannibal is a carnivore's idea of heaven. The restaurant dishes are meat heavy with a focus on pork. The food is great, and the 2 bars were unique with a beer fridge in the back. So I'll go over it some more in my own time just because I don't want to read through this whole thing, but it's just, I don't know. It's just something about it with the name of the restaurant, all of that. I don't know if this is the restaurant. I could not find another restaurant named Cannibal. If you guys find it, let me know. But then I'll show you this. This is their website.
So, how are things?
You know, life.
Oh, this is all big now. Let me move this over again. Sorry, guys. We're just doing it in real time because I want to show you everything. So this is where it led me to. And I just looked up the word jerky, which is just odd. So there's a woman named Catherine January who was, part of this. And it's just a weird thing. But if we go back to the emails, so I'm just giving you an idea of how this all works. Let's just go back to this whole jerky situation. Let's move you over. All right, so Jeffrey asked that you make some beef jerky for him, please. Please confirm. You got it. So it's a person named Karina Shaliak. I mean, it's just all over. I don't. Okay, look. Why would this be redacted? Why would anything be redacted concerning jerky? I'm very confused. Unless we are talking about human meat, child meat. I already know the intestines they talked about taste like cream cheese of a baby. I can get into that some more. I have a video that is very, very, very difficult. I didn't want to do it on this one because my last video, guys, if you don't know, I got demonetized on. I didn't even have anything bad in there, but they still demonetized me. So I have to be very careful over here. That's why I appreciate you guys supporting me. You guys know about my merch at realmelanieking.com, my custom merch. The link is below in the description box. But it says, hi, there is 1 bag of beef jerky in the fridge at 71st. So to me, 71st is indicating New York. Usually people are indicating New York when they talk about streets like this. I don't know. That Cannibal restaurant is in New York. Please get it. Also, blank has more at her place. Please get it from her as well and bring it all with you. I suppose it needs to be in a cold insulated bag, right? Huh? A small insulated bag would be just fine. I wouldn't recommend checking it. No need for crazy amounts of ice. One should do smiley face. So not only does he's needing jerky constantly, but then he needs some from another person's place, and then you're going to keep the jerky cooled. That's not how beef jerky works, folks. Let's continue. I mean, it's all over. Jerky. Here's it. What does it say? Recipe for 2 pounds of jerky, 1/3 organic tamari soy sauce, 3 tablespoons sweet soy sauce, keycap mayonnaise, 2 tablespoons of ginger, 2 tablespoons of lemongrass, fresh out. This is all I have, unfortunately. I don't know what kind of meat he was using, but Steve should know if you are not sure either. Huh? Wait, it won't go all the way up. Let me pull this up. Great. Thanks. It looks the same as what I've got. Hence, we'll go for it. Links again. Sent from iPhone. Wait, it says there's an attachment. Where's the attachment? Oh, no, that's just the link for the thing. I thought that was an attachment. Let me just see if I can find a really good one. I mean, these all are just insane. Hi, Leslie. This is to Jeffrey Epstein, but it was forwarded. So this was forwarded from another person to Jeffrey. Jeff had asked to have a sample of his beef jerky tested for nutritional value. Attached are the results we just received. Please let me know if I can be of any further assistance. Be our guest hospitality. This is the executive assistant to Stephen Hansen, president. Rachel Bova. I don't see the attachment. Let me try to pull and see if I can get the attachment, because maybe we can see what the nutritional content is of whatever that this is. Okay, so I just went through a hunt trying to find this attachment. I'm going to have to figure out a way to get this nutritional value, because if they included it, because remember, there's 3 million files that have not been included. But if we can find it, we can see what the nutritional value is, because I'm seeing Jeffrey ask this guy, Stephen Hansen, and Stephen Hansen is mentioned in the actual files like 2,000 times. But look at this email. I found grocery lists. I found all these different things, and it's jerky, jerky, jerky. They never buy jerky. It's always made, right? It says Francis Derby, I believe, is one of his assistants based on what I'm seeing. It says, good day to you both. Just checking to see if the jerky situation has been sorted out. Sue, last we spoke, you planned to have Rich B FedEx it to Paris. So we're FedExing jerky to Paris? Just so we're all on the same page, the jerky is shelf stable and can travel without refrigeration. So I guess they have jerky that can travel without refrigeration. Huh? So there's some that needs to be kept in the fridge, and the other one is shelf stable. I guess they dehydrated it finally. Also, wanted to see if there was any word on my next day to cook for JE and where that might be. I know these things change, so just checking on any tentative plans. Last I heard, it may be Little St. James, that's his island, Epstein's Island, toward the end of the month, I think. this is just weird on every. What it says it's weird on every level. It says, do you guys have a food list? We can do a shop here tomorrow. Sometimes if you're seeing an equal sign or something like that, that actually deals with Microsoft Word or the Microsoft Outlook, and it's like a glitch in the code system. Okay. But it says, still have not been told why he is eating jerky if he is still doing steak casserole. We can get here. What? Bring all the usual and anything that everyone is eating. Thanks. Input. What is going on? Let me just see. I clicked that. Let me click this one. Okay, so please have the following groceries tomorrow, and it lists a couple of different things. What should be in the fridge and outside the fridge? Is there anything that we may need, that I might need, that is short notice about the trip, so we will only have time to buy something early tomorrow morning? Please let me know ASAP what you have. Okay, I will go to the grocery first thing in the morning. You don't have to go too early. I just need to know if there's anything else you need from New York, please, so that I could get it first thing in the morning before we leave. Add some blueberries and buy okay. It should be okay for everything else. Here it is. Please, okay, thank you. Please only get what is on the list. I sent you tonight. We are going to bring other things. Also, I believe we left some of the beef jerky in the fridge last time. Please keep it. Thank you. So, okay, I did my best to go through all of this, guys. I'm going to show you as well. If you want to support me here on the channel, support the work I'm doing. I'm telling you, it's really hard once you start going through this whole thing and trying to piece out what they're talking about, the things that they're, this beef jerky, obviously, I mean, you have to be blind, deaf, and dumb not to know that they are not referring to actual jerky. None of it makes sense. I will come through it some more, but there is a lot more things to cover. I meant to in this video. If you want to support me in this work, you can go to realmelanieking.com. The link is below. I have my different shirts here. My Yahweh collection is new. Jesus is King. Fearless. I have a lot of things that have verse.
With information about the Epstein files release, and some information that has been published stands out. A lot of information is intended to increase the confusion amongst the population rather than elaborate further and give people more clarity and bring people to justice. Like many of the people that are mentioned in the Epstein files, no one is even talking to them or questioning them or investigating them or arresting them. First and foremost,
line you might not have expected to see in the Times. Was Epstein a Mossad agent? New files deepen mystery over Israeli links. Now, I'm pretty sure if a random Labour member had asked that question on Facebook in 2017 to their 100 friends, the Times would have splashed it on the front page of their paper as more evidence of sick anti-Semitism in the Labour Party and just more reason why Jeremy Corbyn should resign. But times have changed. Now these kind of questions can be asked in the paper of record. Even the mainstream is becoming a little more willing to think the unthinkable. So what was this article based on? Well, it references an FBI report included in the Epstein files. The report is from 2020, and it's an account of a briefing from a confidential human source, so in other words, an informant, who was secretly providing information to the FBI. And these are the key parts related to Israel. So you've got something that's redacted, and then it says Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz, CHS, so that's the confidential human source, the informant, learned that Dershowitz influenced many students from wealthy families. For example, Josh Kushner and Jared Kushner were both his students. Dershowitz told the informant that if he were young again, he would be holding a stun gun as an Israeli intelligence Mossad agent. The informant believed Dershowitz was co-opted by Mossad and subscribed to their mission. CHS, the informant, still continues to communicate occasionally for Dershowitz. See previous reporting. Now, I'd love to see the previous reporting. And then the next point is where it gets onto Jeffrey Epstein. So they say Jeffrey Epstein was represented by Dershowitz. CHS, so the confidential human source, remembered Dershowitz tell Alex Acosta, the U.S. Attorney Southern District of Florida at the time, that Epstein belonged to both U.S. and allied intelligence services. CHS shared phone calls between Dershowitz and Epstein during which she took notes. After these calls, Mossad would then call Dershowitz to debrief. Epstein was close to the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, and trained as a spy under him. Barak believed Netanyahu was a criminal. Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates are allied against Qatar, Turkey, Iran, and Syria. One of CHS's, redacted, who presumably worked redacted, asked the informant a lot of questions about Epstein. CHS became convinced that Epstein was a co-opted Mossad agent. See previous reporting. It's pretty clear what this informant believed. Now, of course, it's not clear who the source is. One would presume they would have to be someone close to either Dershowitz or Epstein for the FBI to take them seriously. There's references here to sort of being part of a phone call and taking contemporaneous notes, so that would presumably give the person added legitimacy. That being said, their word should not be taken as gospel. This is sort of one person giving evidence. Maybe they've got a grudge. Maybe they're being led down the garden path on some sort of suspicion. But I mean, clearly this is interesting. So what about other possible evidence? Well, in the Times article, they mention Epstein's well-documented and very close relationship with former Israeli PM Ehud Barak. And the newly released emails make clear that Barak stayed at Epstein's Manhattan apartment on multiple occasions, right up to the year of his arrest in 2019. And we already knew from reporting by Dropsite News, more on that later, that Epstein helped Barak transition from defense minister into an international security consultant. So he linked him up with various governments who could become clients. So not actually dissimilar to the relationship between Epstein and Mandelson, formed this very close relationship with a senior government minister. Barak was defense minister as well as prime minister. And then when they leave office, help them link up with either the private sector or other governments. Again, that doesn't prove a Mossad connection. There is reference to Mossad in the emails, though. So these are two of the emails where the agency is mentioned. So the first relates to David Boies, a lawyer who was representing Harvey Weinstein at the time, who was accused of hiring former Mossad agents to intimidate Weinstein's victims. So it's the lawyer, obviously Weinstein was being accused of multiple sex offenses. And then the lawyer, it was said, hired Mossad agents to help intimidate the victims. So this is an exchange from Jeffrey Epstein to Ehud Barak. November 2017. Did Boies ask you to help obtain former Mossad agents to do dirty investigations? This is getting a lot of press. And then Barak clearly doesn't want to talk about this by email. Call me. I'm in Paris. And then Jeffrey Epstein responds, I tried, and then gives the number that he can be contacted on. The second exchange from the following year, it seems, I suppose, like more of a joke, an inside joke, but who knows how it should be read. This is from December 2018 from Ehud Barak. Hi, Jeff, are you going to be in London on Thursday? Best, EB. And then Epstein replies, unfortunately not. You should make clear that I don't work for Mossad. Smiley face. Again, read that what you will. The article also references what is probably the strongest circumstantial evidence relating Epstein to Mossad. And that's this man's. This is Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. He's a disgraced media tycoon, so he owned lots of British papers and then stole people's pensions. He was widely suspected of having connections to the Israeli intelligence agency. And after he mysteriously died, after falling from his yacht in 1991, his body was brought to Israel to be buried in Jerusalem's Mount of Olives. That's a graveyard reserved for Israel's elite servants. His funeral was attended by Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Shamir, Israeli President Chaim Herzog, and at least 6 serving and former heads of Israeli intelligence. And a lot of Mossad agents at that funeral. Investigative journalists Gordon Thomas and Martin Dillon even referred to Maxwell as Israel's super spy, and that was in their book of the same name. And in that book, they claim that Maxwell engaged in operations on behalf of Mossad, but then threatened to blow the whistle unless officials agreed to pay back some of his enormous debts. So he got into all of these debts. He was stealing the pension fund from his companies, and it seems like he sort of thought, okay, desperate times, desperate measures. I'm going to say to Mossad, unless you help me pay my debts, I'm going to go public on our relationship. That was their theory. They claim Mossad killed him in response. Obviously, this is all sort of in the public domain. That book was published a while ago. What we've now learned in these emails is that Epstein may have been convinced, or at least he read the book, and he extensively quoted from the book in a 2018 email, again, to a redacted recipient. So this is a quote from that book. Robert Maxwell threatened Mossad. He told them that unless they gave him £400 million to save his crumbling empire, he would expose all he had done for them. In that time, he had free access to Margaret Thatcher's Downing Street, Ronald Reagan's White House, to the Kremlin, and to the corridors of power throughout Europe. Maxwell passed on all the secrets he learned to Mossad in Tel Aviv. In turn, they tolerated his excesses, vanities, and insatiable appetite for a luxurious lifestyle and women. He told his controllers who they should target and how they should do it. He appointed himself as Israel's unofficial ambassador to the Soviet bloc. Just to remind you, this is Jeffrey Epstein quoting a book about Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, Robert Maxwell. Now, on first reading, that email didn't scream to me that he actually worked for Mossad. Like he's read a book about Mossad and is now quoting something to a person. So this doesn't seem like someone who has insider info on Mossad. Oh, by the way, the subject line for that was "he was passed away." That's not from the book. So I suppose it does look like Epstein's convinced there. He's saying he was passed away and here's the evidence. However, this exchange from 2017 provides an interesting twist. So in 2017, the self-help author Deepak Chopra wrote this to Epstein. Come to Israel with us. Relax and have fun with interesting people. If you want to use a fake name, bring your girls. It will be fun to have you. Love. You know, this is an aside, but this is obviously sort of the grotesque nature of how these people email each other. Use a fake name, bring your girls. It will be fun. It's all very gross. Epstein's response, though, is perhaps more surprising. So he says, another location, I do not like Israel at all. And so this email, I don't like Israel at all, is being used by some to sort of suggest clearly he wasn't a Mossad agent. If he was a Mossad agent, why would he hate Israel? But I actually think the combination of him clearly at around the same time, so this email is from 2017, the email sort of where he's quoting about Maxwell being killed, are somewhat contemporaneous. Seems to me like it could have been the case that Jeffrey Epstein was working for Israel to some degree, maybe, probably not as like an explicit Mossad agent, but maybe as an asset or whatever. And then he had realized sort of a bit late in the day what Mossad does if you cross them. And he was worried that he was going to have the same ending as Robert Maxwell. And so he didn't want to go to Israel because he had, at one point been working for Israel. Then something's gone on where he's crossed them. Maybe they weren't particularly happy with him getting caught for the whole child sex offense and stuff. Maybe they thought that, was putting them at risk. Maybe they'd fallen out, and then he didn't want to go to Israel because he didn't want to end the same way that Robert Maxwell did. That is speculative, completely speculative, but I also don't think it's crazy, which is the standard I set for myself. Right. Sorry, let's go on. The Times quoted Lynette Nussbacher, I probably pronounced that wrong, a former British Army intelligence officer and lecturer in war studies at the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. So she said this is a military expert, this is who they quoted. Every intelligence agency has people who work for the agency who are on salary, who have their pension paid for by the agency. We call them officers. Then there are people whose officers influence them to do work for their agency, sometimes paid, sometimes manipulated, sometimes blackmailed. They're called agents. And then there are people who are assets. They are just useful. Is it possible that Epstein was an asset to the Mossad? Yes. Do I think he was an agent of any intelligence agency? I think it was unlikely. Was he an officer? No. So she's saying it is plausible, possible that he was an asset, though not someone sort of directly working for Mossad, which seems plausible to me. Someone I trust on this, who's done a lot more research on the relationship between Epstein and Israel than I have, is Murtaza Hussain from Dropsite. He's written extensively on Epstein's connections, especially to Ehud Barak. And I just wanted to show you a short clip, which was from the interview I did with him in November last year.
You know, it's very clear that he had more influence and power than many powerful government officials around the world. If you look at these emails between himself and Barak, at this time when 2012, 2013, when Barak was still one of the most powerful, influential people in the Israeli security establishment and political establishment, there's a clear power dynamic in those emails. It was not that Epstein was seeking out Barak's attention or trying to get a hold of Barak per se. It was really inverted. Barak was somebody who was eager for Epstein's attention, eager to work with Epstein, anxious to be in his good books and so forth. So, you know, it certainly wasn't like Epstein was working for Mossad or something like that. He was far more powerful than that. He was somebody who people who were working for Israeli intelligence, like Barak, continued to do throughout his career and throughout his life. They were looking for Epstein's help. So Epstein was somebody who had leverage over all these people. He was seen as someone more powerful than them. You know, if I were to speculate, you know, very conservatively, he was somebody who clearly had the ability to make individuals very wealthy if they were connected to him, if they were in his good books. So that could give him a sense of leverage over them. Also, this is not noted in his emails and it's not noted in his official schedules, but we know that he was heavily involved in global sex trafficking of minors to other elites. So one can only imagine what sort of leverage that may have also afforded him.
As a small business owner, you need a tax service that lets you focus on your business. Try TurboTax.
Helena, I don't know where you stand on this question. Mossad agent or not? I suppose there's also the point that it's interesting that this is now being picked up in newspapers like The Times.
At least, I mean, I even saw Tim Stanley on the Telegraph's Daily Tea podcast say, why is nobody talking about the Israel connection here? Which I thought was very illuminating. In fact, I think Tim Stanley in the last kind of year or so has really kind of changed around what I thought of his journalism. I think he's been very interesting to cover as someone's very candid about conservative politics. That's a story for another time. But if even he on the Telegraph are talking about this, then clearly these links are much greater than what was being reported previously. Remember, we were all talking about how they were talking about these Russia links, but no one was mentioning the Israel links. Now the tide on that beginning to turn, which is interesting. I think, in my own opinion, from the information that we have right now, I think I probably closely align with what Lynette Nussbacher was saying specifically. I think she's right in her assessment of this, insofar as could he possibly have been an asset? It looks quite likely. It looks quite likely to give the links to all the powerful people that he's got, whether that is in a position of power where they're looking for his advice or whether he's looking for them or whether it's vice versa or whatever it is. I think that that's what the information that we have from these files certainly shows. Do we know that he was sympathetic to Israel? Absolutely. Not just in terms of his personal agreements with people from the country or from high-profile people from the country, but the mission of the country. Right? He was the guy who donated to the IDF, lots of money sent to the IDF. He even donated to the charity which puts the most amount of money, or puts lots of money into settlements, into actually funding illegal settlements in the West Bank. So this is somebody who has really close ties to the project that Israel represents, even if he's not directly being related to the Mossad necessarily, right? Whether he's someone who's a person of interest, who has these links to powerful people, and who may have done things that they had similar interests as, right? There's a difference between someone doing something because they've been told to and converging interests based upon shared ideologies or shared values or on shared positions, which may be the case. It may be the case that just happens to dovetail into each other because, of course, we see from the cozy little chats between Ehud Barak and Jeffrey Epstein. Barak was the one who got him onto Palantir. These links between powerful companies and powerful people and this, I guess that's a very kind of military-based relationship between not only Palantir and Israel, but then between Palantir, Israel, and the United States, and indeed potentially the United Kingdom, but given the fact that Palantir have contracts with us now as well. So those are all converging interests. Does he have to be on the books as a paid agent for that to be important, for Israel to be important for the Mossad? Clearly not. Clearly that doesn't have to be a direct relationship rather than a causal or casual relationship. But it all does look extremely fishy. Although I will say, when it comes to the thing saying, I don't like Israel at all, you may be scared of going there if in case they would hold him up for the things that he'd potentially double-cross them for. I mean, well, Israel have shown they're very happy to assassinate people in other countries as well. Like Atef Siyasa was assassinated in Paris for being a member of the PLO. So I don't think it is necessarily past Israel's remit to engage in reprisals against their state enemies, whether they're on Israeli territory or not. Of course, I mean, whether that came into Jeffrey Epstein's mind at the time of go, need to stay away from Israel for reprisals, of course, that remains to be seen. But
well, I mean, even if you think they could take you out in another part of the world, it's presumably easier for them to take you out in Israel, right?
True.
So he may not have thought, I'll be safe in a New York prison, where he did die in suspicious circumstances. So he didn't need to think that he was safe outside of Israel to think that there was an increased threat inside Israel. So I could see, to me, it seems unlikely that he just suddenly changed his mind, where like his whole life he'd been really pro-Israel, donating to the IDF, yada, yada, yada. And then suddenly he's like, actually, I hate Israel. It seems to me that probably if he doesn't want to go to Israel, there is a reason beyond he's just sort of lost the taste for it.
That's true. You don't turn heel on an entire political project that you've self-financed, and not just self-financed kind of casually, right? There are charities that support, civil society in Israel, which is people donate to it. It's not a big deal. But donating to a charity that funds settlements, right, illegal settlements in the West Bank, shows that your connections to Israel are a deal greater than just, I like this country because it's the Jewish homeland or whatever. It's the project of colonization that he's directly funding with his own money there, which is a much closer link than most kind of casual Israel fans, I guess you'd call them at this point, would have, other than that.
Yeah, I don't think he'd just gone. I actually feel, even though I sort of made this connection in the last 2 hours, I feel now quite confident that Jeffrey Epstein was too scared to go to Israel in 2017, and that's very interesting.
I've not heard the name Lynette Nussbacher in a while. She was one of the experts that they hired to talk about military strategy on the BBC show Time Commanders, if you remember that one.
Fantastic.
Which, although that used to be hosted by Greg Wallace, though. So best a little less said about the better.
I suppose the Israel part of the narrative that I always found, I suppose, attractive in terms of sort of parsimony was the money side, because the big gap in the sort of whole story with Epstein, it was always quite clear to me how he made these elite friends, right? He was charismatic. He could provide nerdy guys with sexy parties that they might not get otherwise invited to, right? He made them feel like hot and sexy as well as smart. Right, these are kind of nerdy people who got to feel like jocks for a while, but he could only do that because he had loads of money. Also, he could bring very interesting people, some of whom he brought because he was sort of providing their institutions with money. So all of these brilliant academics come because he's rich, and the hole in the story was always, so how did he become so rich that he could lavish this much money on people who are already rich? Because to seem rich around Bill Gates, you need a real lot of money. Like you could, if you have a couple mil, you can seem rich around like ordinary Tom, Dick, and Harry. But if you're hanging out in those circles and people see you to be rich as someone who can provide them with money, you have to be really, really goddamn rich. And I think there was not a good enough explanation as to where that money came from. I think why the drop site news articles were interesting to me, and why that conversation with Murtaza Hussain was interesting to me, is because basically they're saying the money came from money laundering, essentially. So he could help if you wanted to hide money or move illicit money from government to government, or sort of from dodgy investor to dodgy investor, or dodgy investor to government, vice versa, arms trade, whatever, then you wouldn't go to a normal bank. You'd go to a sort of well-connected international person who's willing to break the law, and that Jeffrey Epstein was that person. And also, when it comes to illicit finance and money laundering, you can take a much bigger cut than official finance, because you're taking a bigger risk. And so that's where the money came from. So that is, if that solves the money problem, then I'm less convinced he was paid by the Israelis. So to the extent that that's where the money comes from, I'm less convinced that he was getting paid by the Israelis. But he was clearly had a strong relationship with the Israelis. And I think for a while it was positive, and then it turned negative. And he was scared.
Quite a theory.
files have made their way to Capitol Hill today. Congressman Ro Khanna, Congressman Thomas Massie got a chance a few minutes ago to start viewing the unredacted Epstein files. You know, the ones where someone says they love the torture video or they love that 11-year-old girl. Let's do it all again. Yeah, all of that really disgusting stuff that has been redacted by the DOJ. It wasn't supposed to be. Why was it? Huge portions of the files they did, and Pam Bondi didn't comply with the Epstein Transparency Act, which may be why they've been shoving Todd Blanche out there in front of the cameras. I don't know. You might have also noticed this ad last night during the Super Bowl. Watch.
After years of being kept apart, we're standing together. Standing together. Because this girl deserves the truth.
Because she deserves the truth. Because we all deserve the truth.
Ouch. Absolutely. Also early this morning, Epstein's child sex trafficking girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, was on Capitol Hill to appear before Congress. When asked direct questions, she pled the fifth, of course. Ro Khanna's response to this was, here was my conclusion. After sitting through Maxwell's deposition with her refusing to answer a single question about the men who raped underage girls, saying she would do so only for clemency. She wants to be let out, of course. She must immediately be sent back to the maximum security prison where she belongs, of course, not in that cushy little country club that she's currently hanging out in. So what questions? Why did the DOJ fail to comply with the Epstein Transparency Act? Of course, Congressman Massie on our show last week spilled the beans about it. He was asked about this yesterday. What answers does he want? Listen.
But the one thing I want is the one thing the DOJ is not releasing, which is the names of the clients and co-conspirators in the sex trafficking ring. So they've either over-redacted the files in some cases or just completely omitted files in other cases. The unfortunate thing that they've also failed at is they have released victims' names.
Yeah. Someone who knows just how dark and deceitful and satanic these Washington pedophiles can be is former Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who thankfully got out of that disgusting swamp, but she is a truth teller, and she has been all along. Congresswoman, great to see you. Thank you for joining us here on Redacted for the first time.
Thank you so much for having me today.
It's our pleasure. So just at a high level, I want to get your response to this. First of all, the Super Bowl ad calling on the Department of Justice to actually release what they said what they are compelled to release under the law that the president signed into law, and they still have failed to do this. And your former colleagues are still begging for them to provide these files.
Yeah. When I watch a video like that, it hits home in a very different way because I met most of those women and spent time with them, heard their stories, watched them tremble and cry as they told their stories in front of the world at several press conferences in Washington, D.C. last year. And my heart goes out to them. They have been fighting for so long, and they've worked very hard to join together, finding each other over all these years. And all they want is transparency. They want our government to do the job that it's supposed to do, that the American people want it to do, and our taxpayer dollars pay for it to do. They want the truth to come out. And it's just shocking that even after the big fight we had in late 2025, after passing a law, the Epstein Transparency Act, is still shocking that this is still such a battle.
You have a lot of knives in your back from people you thought were your colleagues for continuing to push for disclosure. Now, originally, when we saw ads like this, I thought that this was a matter of sexual abuse and sexual assault. After reading the files for over a week now, it appears that it's violence, possibly murder. So a survivor is not just someone who got away having been abused, but got away with their lives when it seems like there were many who did not. So I want to offer you an opportunity to take a victory lap, because you were right that the American people need to see this, and also let you sort of, maybe I want to ask you, did you know that it was this violent? Did you know that it was this far?
I didn't know it was that. First of all, thank you for that. I very much appreciate it. Yes, I do have many knives in my back. I've also got them in the front as well.
Yeah.
I went through quite a battle there. And what people need to understand is nothing changed about me. I didn't change any of my views, my policy views. I very much still firmly believe in the things that I always said and the things I campaigned on in 2024. The problem is that in 2025, the president and many Republicans that I served with in Congress, they're the ones that changed their views, and that's unfortunate. But the release of the files has proved, to me, it's proved more to the American people than I think they can almost handle. I think people are on overload right now because it's so shocking, the things that we're reading in these files. And remember, there are millions more files to go. This is not all of them. And they're being held back. But when you see the DOJ breaking the law, they're breaking the law because they're redacting the name of former president, Secretary of State, members of the government. They're redacting those names. That's breaking the law. Every name has to be revealed. They're also deleting files that they release. That files should not be deleted once they're released to the public. They're redacting names that should not be redacted, while they're letting out information on the victims, which they're supposed to redact personal information about the victims, and they're not. They're not covering that up. They're releasing that. And I think what this shows to America is that our government has betrayed victims, innocent victims, in ways that we can't even comprehend, to the point of child sex trafficking, satanic rituals, maybe cannibalism, and rape and trafficking of women. And that fell almost inferior to some of these other things. But it's the vast cover-up for the rich, powerful elites. It's really the international deep state. And it's the people that live in some sort of sphere that the common man can't even comprehend and doesn't walk in. And it's also pulling back the veil, which sadly wasn't surprising to me, that many of the things that the people have had to endure, such as COVID, such as things that happen in our economy, businesses that get supported, industries that get supported, others that get torn down, seems to be planned years in advance by this gigantic network of the international deep state, the international elites. And it's the stuff that they called people like me and probably you and many others conspiracy theorists, and made us said that we were all crazy. But yet here it is, it's coming out. It's not a random person saying that they were saying things like they're eating babies or they're eating human flesh. It's not a random person saying that. There's a lot of people saying it. And then there's not a random person accusing some of our top government leaders of being associated with one of the most disgusting people, Jeffrey Epstein, who is a convicted pedophile, but also fully intertwined in foreign governments, specifically Israel. And these aren't one-offs. Right. These are all throughout the files, and this can't be ignored. People are not going to let this go. As much as the president wants and the Speaker of the House want, people are not letting it go. They're absolutely outraged.
If I may respond to that little bit, because you're right, there's so many people who are implicated, and they're giving us these little breadcrumb excuses, and I'm like, no, I'm not done with you, but I got to get over here because this. And so how can we act on any of it when we're all so crazed and it's so vast? I just wanted to validate that. Please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to ask you, because behind the scenes right now, Congresswoman, I mean, what is happening? You know, you've got Massey, you've got Ro Khanna, Congressman Massey on the show last week. He was furious. I mean, sorry, he wasn't on the show. I spoke to him on the phone, and he said, Clayton, these co-conspirators, why are their names redacted? These people who were saying the torture video, this and that, like these names were not under the Transparency Act supposed to be redacted. It seems like Pam Bondi, all of these people are actively covering up. Is there any other way to read it? Like, I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but it seems like they're actively covering up for these people, these pedophiles.
Well, okay, I'm going to say it like this, and a lot of people have a hard time with me telling the absolute truth. And it's hard for people to understand. Look, I fought for President Trump more than most any elected Republican in Washington, D.C. January 6th, after that, they all turned their back on him. And I was one of the few, me and Matt Gaetz and a few others, that were out there on the front lines for him. And we stayed out there by ourselves for a very long time until he won the primary. And that's when everybody else came on board and said, okay, we'll put on the MAGA hat and we'll play the game. Well, here's the reality. These things that are coming out in the files, these are actual FBI forms. When it says that an FBI agent took out the DVR in the prison where Jeffrey Epstein was supposedly killed, that's on an FBI form. That's not somebody calling in an anonymous tip or writing it on some deep, dark place in the internet. That's an actual FBI file stating what happened. And people are going to have to completely take in what they are seeing with their own eyes, what they're reading, and what they're being told. The reality is the Trump administration is not releasing the information. And I got yelled at by the president over this. This is why he called me a traitor. He called me a traitor because I would not take my name off the discharge petition, because I stood firmly and said, no, we're going to release the Epstein files. I'm standing with women who were raped as teenagers. I'm not standing with the government. I don't support the cover up of all of this stuff, whatever it may be. And the president got mad at me, and he told me, and I've said this multiple times, he told me his friends would get hurt. And that's what he told me. And then we're seeing a continued slow walk and cover up of a lot of this information. And I know that is why. I firmly believe that that's why it is being covered up. Look, Pam Bondi works directly for Donald Trump. She is not out there an independent attorney general. She can't just run out and do whatever she wants. She works at the pleasure and approval of the President of the United States. Everybody in the administration does. So does the FBI. They're under the very same pleasure and approval of the President of the United States. So when everyone's getting mad at Pam Bondi, or you can name anybody you want. The man at the top is Donald Trump. He's the president. And he's the one that was completely against releasing the files when we started fighting to get them released. He's the one that called it a Democrat hoax. He's the one that, he invites everybody to the White House, but he will not invite these women that have defended him, by the way. They have defended him and said Donald Trump did nothing wrong. They have defended him, yet he doesn't bring them in the White House and support them. But what you're seeing is, if it looks like a duck, and if it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck.
Or it might be a Lutnick.
Right.
Or it might be a Lutnick duck.
Early onset dementia and Alzheimer's are on the rise. Reports show that a 373% increase in diagnosis among young people under the age of 44. So when this role we've been given as protectors of our children and their generation and their peers. And I don't think that there's anyone else to protect. So I don't care about Howard Lutnick. I don't care about protecting anyone else who might be associated with something that I once validated. I really don't. And so Massey just called for the resignation of Howard Lutnick, who clearly told us lies about his association with Epstein. And so I want to ask you about, the domino effect and who's being protected and who's saying children are not important. And again, how do we know that they're not still being hurt? Because in one of the depositions, it seems that at least Lex Wexner did name a predecessor to Jeffrey Epstein. How do we know? Aren't we here to protect children? I've asked you 9 questions. I guess you can choose. I'm sorry, I'm upset.
Pick which one you want.
Yeah. Right. No, how do we know it hasn't stopped? We only got a glimpse into a moment of time, and that's in the past. So how do we know what has happened since then? I mean, people are even questioning if Jeffrey Epstein is still alive. And I don't think that's a bad question. I think we should ask every question. At this point, in this time, after what we have read in these files, every question is valid. Right. And you know how I really feel about it? Look, my parents are baby boomers. I'm Generation X. I'm 51 years old. And I love my parents and I love many people in their generation. But I am sick and tired of the baby boomers that are in charge of everything right now. That's across both sides of the aisle. They are responsible for so many of the bad things in our lives. They're responsible for the nearly $40 trillion in debt. They're responsible for all the foreign wars that our military has had to fight for decades now. They're responsible for our Social Security is going to be completely broke in just a matter of years. The baby boomers are responsible for this. And then what are we seeing in the Epstein files? A bunch of gross, disgusting, evil, corrupt, lying, piece of crap baby boomers are all in there. So how I feel about it is they all need to resign. They all, and many of them should go to jail, because I'm honestly sick and tired of the whole entire group, both sides of the aisle.
Do you think we're going to get any answers? You know, one of the things that Ro Khanna had talked about, and Massey too, is about having really sort of an extracurricular special counsel. I guess you could call it a master. Forgive my ignorance on the procedural piece of all of this, but
An independent counsel.
Yeah. And so being able to have that outside of this process with the DOJ, and unfortunately, unless they're bringing some sort of a court case, that's not going to happen. The judge in this has said that. So they're really right now at the mercy of Pam Bondi. I mean, they're at the mercy of these people.
No, you, the American people, are the independent counsel. That is you. You're the independent counsel. Do you trust your politicians? Do you trust anybody anymore to appoint an independent counsel to provide justice? I don't. I worked in Washington for 5 years. I'm going to tell you flat out right now, you can't trust hardly anyone up there. They will not do it. They will not do the right thing. The American people are the independent counsel, and you have the 100% sole power to end all of this stuff whenever the American people get finally fed up with it. And you vote, you donate, you support candidates. You can also choose to not vote, support, donate. You can choose to say, we're not having anything to do with any of you, or you can figure out a way to beat them. But it's pretty hard. Look at what's happening to Thomas Massey right now. And I 100% support Thomas Massey. He's a dear friend of mine. I endorse him, and I really hope that Kentucky 4 re-elects him, because he's one of the few honest, good men in Washington, D.C. And I can say that because I know every single one of them. And Thomas Massey stands above pretty much all of them. And what is happening to him is outrageous. But I can tell you right now, do I believe that this administration is going to provide justice for anything in the Epstein files? No, absolutely not, because the president told me that his friends would get hurt. So I have that to go on, and that was the president's words directly to me. So I don't think anything's going to happen. Are we going to see people resign and step down outside of people over and outside of the royal family? No, I don't think so. Will we see Israel held accountable and questioned for their part, their role, maybe what Jeffrey Epstein was doing with Mossad? No, I highly doubt it, because Netanyahu is coming to the White House tomorrow to make sure that his friend Donald Trump delivers on this war in Iran that Netanyahu wants to happen. So I hate to be the bearer of extremely honest but depressing bad news. No one's going to be held accountable. No one is ever held accountable except the innocent American people. Think about it. The people that were forced to take a COVID vaccine, the parents that couldn't control their school boards, so their kids were taught all kinds of crap. The pro-lifers were sent to prison when they prayed outside of abortion clinics. People that walked in open doors at the Capitol, they went to jail, but no one else goes, no other kind of political protester goes to jail. I mean, no, it's on and on and on. time and time again, the American people are the ones that pay the price, but never, ever, ever the rich, powerful elites. They never, ever go to jail. Not
That's
unless,
really sick. Yeah.
but not unless they're being taken down for a reason.
I mean, you have like Lindsey Graham, like the president tweeting a picture of him and warmonger Lindsey Graham yesterday during the Super Bowl, as if anyone voted for this at all. And then you've got the demon, I mean, literally a demon, Satan incarnate, Netanyahu, coming to Washington, D.C., as you pointed out, tomorrow to push for us to go to war in Iran. And then we're still sitting on waiting for 3 million documents to be released that were all supposed to be released. Have you had a chance? Have you gone through any of them at all to know that, like, why are we waiting on these 3 million other documents? Do you have any idea from your experience in Congress on why they would be stonewalling that chunk of documents?
It's totally on purpose. They're being directed to be very careful about what they release. So I'm sorry. I'm one of those. I have seen behind the curtain way too many times and for too long. It's all intentional.
Yeah,
that's just the fact. I'm sorry. I wish I had a better answer.
I want to ask you maybe a personal question. So I think there probably are adults in the room, in the government, that maybe wanted at some point to do the right thing and show us behind the curtain of this shadow government. And then they get into office and they are unable. So can you tell me, without giving into specifics, are there forces that tried to influence you to stop doing what you're doing now? And what did it take to leave there intact?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, there's a lot of good people that go to Washington with great intentions, and still they really wish they could do the right thing. But the system is not set up that way. You're watching it. What happened to me? What happened to me, and what is currently happening to Thomas Massie? We are great examples of how you cannot operate independently, just purely working and representing your district. You're not allowed to. Because it's a two-party system in Washington, D.C. I call it the political industrial complex. And you're either on the Democrat team or you're on the Republican team. And if you cause a problem for whichever party is in power, well, they're coming after you. So no, you cannot go unscathed if you go against the party in power or the administration. Even if you're doing the right thing, such as saying, no, I'm going to stand with women who were raped at 14 years old. That's the right thing to do. I don't care who the president is. I don't care who the Speaker of the House is. It doesn't matter. No, here's what happens is, well, number one, it's hard to get a bill passed. If you are bucking the system, so to speak, even if the system is corrupt, and you're giving them a hard time, and doing things like, I wouldn't vote for foreign aid and foreign war funding. So I got on the bad side of a bunch of the neocon Republicans.
Right.
And they got mad at me, so they wouldn't vote for some of my bills or some of my amendments, even though ideologically they agreed with a bill or amendment of mine, say on some other issue, but they were mad at me because I was like, no, I'm not voting to fund the Ukraine war ever. Or no, I think Israel's doing just fine. We don't need to give them a penny, not a single penny. Nor do we need to give it to any other country, but they get mad at me for that. And then there's other ways that they pressure you. They will really it'll go to the extreme. So what did I do? I stood up against the president. I wouldn't take my name off the discharge petition when he was telling me to. And so he put out a post, called me a traitor, and said that he was going to primary me, which is absolutely absurd. I voted with the man 98% of the time. Many of my bills in Congress are literal identical reflections of his executive orders. There is hardly any daylight between my policies and supposedly his policies, except when you come down to the Epstein files, fighting wars on behalf of Israel. I refused to support one of his bills that opened the back door to a central bank digital currency. I said, no, I'm not going to vote for that. That's something I'm afraid of. So there was only a few little things. And then look at what they did to me. And then you look at Thomas Massie. So had I See, I can't play for a team that refuses to win. I cannot fight for a team that doesn't do the right thing. And Republicans are pathetic. They promise one thing during campaigns, and then when they finally get power, they turn into the worst weak men you've ever seen in your life. And they're straight up uniparty. I mean, look at Lindsey Graham. He's the ultimate example. Look at Mike Johnson, the ultimate example. All of them are so weak and pathetic. I can't fight for that team. I can't have anything to do with it. Now, Thomas Massey, God bless him. He's a lot more stubborn than I am. And he said, no, I'm going to stay in here. But you know what they're doing to him? They told every political consultant that worked for him that we will make sure you never get hired by any other political campaign in politics. So 3 political consultants of his quit. They quit because they go out of business. Lucky he's got a couple of others that stayed in there with him. So first off, they make it almost impossible for you to hire people to run a campaign. So they basically blacklist you and make it hard for you to do the most important part, which is get your message out to your voters, defend yourself from attacks, and raise money. And so, no, politics is a blood sport. And that's what people need to understand. It is 100% a blood sport. And the rhetoric you hear on the campaign trail, it's mostly bullshit for most Republicans, because as soon as they get your vote and they get back into Washington, it's business as usual. It's back to, they all step in line and make sure they're doing exactly what they get told, because they're terrified of something happening to them like what happened to me, or they're terrified of what's happening to Thomas Massey. Even if they wanted to fight, they won't do it because they're too scared. They're honestly too scared. Many of them walk up to my face, say, hey, Marjorie, how are you doing? They'll text message me, just being my friend. They'll say hi to Thomas Massey, call him. They'll say, Thomas, you're a good friend of mine. But have you seen any of these people? Not one of them come out and defend us. Not one of them have anything nice to say publicly because they're too scared of the machine. And that's what's absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
Cheese stands alone.
They are weak uniparty. Yeah, that's all they are. We have, 35, 40,000 people watching right now across all the platforms. Are you going to run for president?
Oh gosh, no. Everybody keeps asking me that. No, I don't have any plans to run for president. I'm not running for governor. I'm not running for Senate. And honestly, after everything I've seen in Washington, especially the past few years, I really don't think it's a system that I want to be a part of. And again, it really boils down to, I honestly couldn't go all out and fight like I did for a team that refuses to win, and they refuse to do the right thing. So for me, I feel like I gave it all I had for 5 years. And stood on the issues that really, really mattered. But I don't see, it's not a point in America's history where a normal American like me can actually go to Washington and make the changes that need to be made.
Yeah, I mean, if you go
But
back
I
to
do
like
want to
1830s.
commend you for being somebody who is willing to break down partisan lines, because that's extremely useful right now. If the Epstein documents don't show us that now, that partisan politics is a ruse, and you, as somebody who was a partisan loyalist who is now willing to say, we're going to do better if we break down this binary, I feel like that's extremely useful. So I want to cheer you on for that.
Thank you. Yep. A lot would have to change in the system. I think the American people can fix it, though. I go back to that. And I see that as it feels like a movement that's happening right now, where many people on the left and the right are just so tired of being divided. It's like, why do we have to hate each other? It's really horrible. It's destroyed families and relationships. I mean, even marriages. People have gotten divorced over this. Parents and adult kids stop talking to each other. Neighbors, coworkers, we're not supposed to hate each other, because I really truly feel like the key issues that affect all of us, like, for example, health insurance is too expensive. We're all worried about the future as far as jobs. I know for my kids' generation, just the cost of living, and are we going to be dragged into some foreign war that pulls us into World War III? Those are pretty common issues across the left and the right. And those should be the issues that our government should be working on. But, you know, unfortunately, that's not the case. It's nonstop. It's an outrage machine, and it's intentionally built that way. They drive votes and donations based on fear and hate. And so they drive the left and the right to be afraid of the other side and to hate the other side, so they can drive donations and votes against the other. And I think a lot of Americans are really fed up with that, and they're fed up. They have outrage overload. It's just like, it's too much. I can't be angry and upset every single 20 minutes over something else. So I feel like there is some sort of movement of change happening, but it just hasn't peaked yet. But I think that it will.
We got a super chat. I don't know if you can answer this. We'll get you out of here on this.
Go for it. Follow me.